In this episode, I'm sitting down with Suzy Rosenstein, the dynamic force behind the podcast Woman in the Middle and Woman in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Suzy is a midlife coach here to help you get clear about what you want in midlife. We both believe that age is just a number and that what's actually possible is limitless, and it was such a pleasure to chat with her. So Suzy runs not one but two podcasts very successfully, and I wanted to know how she does it. And she shares so many great tips and advice in this episode. If you think you might want to start a podcast, this episode is for you. And even if you don't, there's so much great wisdom we share, you don't want to miss it. Hello and welcome to the Midlife Biz podcast, the show where we dive deep into how to build an online coaching business even while navigating hot flashes and menopausal brain fog, to name just a few struggles that can come with being an entrepreneur in your midlife. I'm your host, Susanne Reicher, and I help coaches like you who want to build an online business in their 40s, 50s, or 60s that they love, who want to do work that matters, and who want to have the financial and emotional freedom they deserve. Welcome to the Midlife Biz podcast, Suzy Rosenstein.
I am so happy to be here, Suzanne. Thank you.
So honored to have you here. So why don't we start with you sharing your story, who you are, what you do.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. So I am a midlife transition coach. That's in the nutshell, that's what I do. I help women over 50 get crystal clear about what it is that they want, help them get unstuck so they can create a roadmap to a more fun and meaningful next chapter. Regret-free is the goal. Let's have a regret-free life. I know there's no guarantee, but at least we can work on it a little bit and be more thoughtful and intentional about figuring out what it is we really want. So I came to being fascinated about behavior change at a very early age. Even in my high school yearbook, I wrote that I'm fascinated by human behavior. Even then, it's in my high school yearbook. And then I decided to study psychology when I was in university, and I have a master's degree in psychology. And believe it or not, my master's thesis was on the relationship between people and their pet dogs back then. And so it wasn't so much that I'm working on applying that knowledge to what I'm doing now, but it was the way I went about it, which was always long form interview. I got really good at asking questions and interviewing people and looking for patterns of speech. So I did it with my work in graduate school. And then that skill has been relevant in every job I had for 27 years. And then as a coach, of course, getting really good at listening and asking great questions is a key part of the work that we do. So I was always interested in it, always. And so in my last job, I was in a publishing department at a hospital. And it was a great job for as long as it was until it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't was because of me. There was nothing wrong with the job, but I had been in the job too long. So of my 27-year career, I was in that job for 19 years. And the last 5 years of the 19, I started to feel stuck. So for me, that was 45 to 50. And I really was very confused, and I felt so uncomfortable, and I didn't know what the problem was. I started to sense that I wasn't content. That was the first way that it came to me. And I'm like, okay, but what do I want? I guess I'm going to need another job. Like, my solution, the way I was thinking about solving my problem was just getting a new job. And then I started to realize there was more going on for me than that, because I just didn't know what I wanted. And I started to ask all my friends. I really thought that they would have more insight than I had myself, my wiser friends. And so I wasn't getting very far. And I eventually got laid off, and in my 50th year. And so it was kind of a beautiful thing. I was going to be turning 50 that year. And that was 10 years ago. And then or 11 years, almost 11 years now. And so I got laid off, and I did have this sense that it was the gift I couldn't give myself. Because when truth be told, I did have an insight that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I wondered, why didn't that happen yet? And this all came to me from an experience I had in a needlepoint store, where I was in a needlepoint store for the first time ever. I was blown away by all the colors of the threads and how beautiful it was. And I saw across the room the owner of the store teaching a group of women something, midlife women. They were all leaning over this tall table with special lights and special magnification to look at the tiny things they were working on. And I just thought to myself, what the heck? How did this woman figure out how to make a living out of a hobby like needlepoint? I could not believe it. And I went back to, I was at my work at that point, it was near the end. And I just thought to myself, I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. What's going on with me? I'm going to be 50. Oh my God. And I'm still not an entrepreneur. And then I started to realize that I was very fearful. And if I didn't have a guarantee, it wouldn't that be great? If I didn't have a guarantee and wasn't really clear about what I wanted, I had no business pursuing being an entrepreneur, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So that's how I ended my job, very confused. And I had just also started to have a sense that there must be more, that I was meant for more, and that at this rate of speed of being confused about what I wanted, I was wasting valuable time. 5 years, 260 weeks went by. Shocking. And that's where I left it. And then I ended up being invited to a coaching group where I witnessed life coaching for the first time. I was blown away that this coach stayed in her lane. She wasn't trying to be a clinical social worker or anything she didn't have the training to be. And she was just dishing out something that I was craving to hear, and it helped me think and get better perspective on my brain and the way I was looking at the world. And I ended up just training where she trained, and that was that. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that that next step made the most sense. So that's how I started.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing your story. There are so many good nuggets in, and I have to ask, what was the biggest learning in your thesis about how people relate to their pets? As a pet owner, I'm intrigued.
Oh my gosh, how much fun to talk about something I did in the 80s. Well, I have loved dogs my whole life. We grew up breeding St. Bernards, and now I have a 135-pound Newfoundland, and I've just loved dogs my whole life. So I was fascinated by that. What I remember learning is that the way kids, I was just dealing with children, think about their pets, it's very much as if they were humans. It's very much that. So they want them to be included. They're thinking about their emotions. And, around dinner, well, the dog's not getting anything to eat and we're going away. The dog's going to feel alone. And it was just so heartwarming to me. And it feels such a need that, unconditional love is talked a lot about with pets, but that really came up, that they were thinking and considering another living being's emotions.
It's amazing the connection we as humans have to dogs. I don't think we have them to any other animals the same way. With cats, we see them as a little bit separate, I feel. I mean, we love them. You can love, of course, an animal the same as a dog. But yeah, it's a very unique, I feel, relationship. I
Agreed.
feel that especially dogs and cats, they're really there to teach us about presence and our intuition and our emotions. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I cannot imagine my life without a dog. We
Mm.
had two golden retrievers over 20 years. After I got married, we had one golden and another golden. And then the year I turned 50, I was really thinking, what do I really want? I had the job upheaval, and I was going to
That's
be
when you got a dog.
a few months after that. Yep. Because our dog passed. It was very traumatic what
Okay.
happened. And I pitched a Newfoundland to my family. My husband didn't grow up with dogs, but he'd been 20 years with the Goldens. And I started to really crave that slice of childhood that I had when we had the St. Bernards. I was very involved. I was in the dog show ring. We showed them at dog shows. My father was into breeding them. And I loved growing up with that large dog experience, I just loved it. And I thought, that's what I want for my kids. Even though they're older, I had my first kid going to university that year. So they were junior high and high school-ish. I guess they were in high school at that point. And I just really wanted that. And they all were totally into it. And we do a lot around water. So we wanted to go with a Newfoundland, a swimmer, a water rescue dog over a St. Bernard. So we made that choice. And it has been, he's 10 now. It has been unbelievable. He is such a member of the family. He's so smart. He's so sweet and he's so well behaved. And hopefully he will continue to be well behaved while we are talking today.
Mine too. No, but seriously, I think having a dog is the best thing, especially when you're an entrepreneur. I basically just run my business to be able to support my dog and give her the best life possible. Spend
Agreed.
time with her, being able to take like 2 or 3 hour long breaks in the day to do a trip.
That is great. No, we're the same. We just I worry about him so much. Anytime I go away, I'm so worried about him. I am just I we love him to bits and it's really a joy.
Yeah, I never left her alone. So
Hard.
yeah, I know it's going to be really hard just for me. I mean, yeah, she's fine staying alone for a few hours, but yeah, not for longer yet. We'll see how that goes. And then getting back to that big transition when you got fired,
Laid off.
laid off,
Not
laid
fired.
off. Sorry, lost in translation, not a native English speaker. And that's what we say in German. I just translated it in English. So.
Okay.
So yeah, laid off. At an age where other people are probably just telling themselves to stay with it until retirement, it's safer, and then you get the good pension or something. That's what my parents did,
Yep.
right? What did your parents say?
Nothing really. Uh, I grew up in a step in this with a stepmother, and my parents died when I was young, but she worked as a nurse. She had a full life. It was very physical, very physically demanding. And she wasn't worried about me being an entrepreneur, but
Okay.
I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs
Or
at
friends,
all.
your surrounding.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. When I look around, the majority of my friends are not entrepreneurs. So everybody was just so happy because I'd been whining for 5 years about being stuck and confused. So at the first step of just getting training, again, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but everybody was very happy that I was excited about something. It took about 6 months after the layoff to feel like I did have some shame about being laid off. It did feel very harsh, but I started to feel better about what was possible. Like, oh, this makes great sense. And then once I started the training, I was just all in on learning these skills, but I still didn't know what I was going to do with them. Now, where I went, there was a lot of talk and support and training about also being an entrepreneur, which today means having an online business and becoming pretty visible depending on how you decide to promote your business and the way you can help people. So I think there was a lot of support, but I didn't have a lot of entrepreneurs around me. Yeah, that's not the most common profession in my family.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think it's probably normal for most people. For me, it was when I went to Bali. I went to Bali for yoga teacher training, and then we only had good internet in the co-working spaces. So it was
Wow.
also really difficult sometimes to have a good connection. And I already had a little yoga travel blog. It was more a hobby. But anyway, I went there and suddenly I met all those amazing entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And they were jewelry designers or Amazon drop shippers or like online courses, doing all kind of amazing things. It really opened up my eyes to and inspired me a lot to see what's possible.
You know what? I'm so glad you mentioned that because getting into this space, I agree. I have never met more interesting people doing interesting things. And having worked for 27 years in the public sector, really, first of all, there wasn't as much of an emphasis on networking, or at least I didn't emphasize networking, but it just didn't seem like it was a super important part of my job. And because when you don't do that, you're not meeting as many people. In this space, you're always meeting people. And if you're not, you probably should. And so I know a lot of times people feel alone or even lonely when they work from home. And I always say you have to get into some paid groups and some unpaid groups, and you need to make an effort. And then it's great because then you still have your dog, you can still do some laundry, and you can meet people.
I know. And one of the best ways I feel to build connection is really podcasting. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
why I love having a podcast. I love doing interviews and meeting those amazing people, asking them questions, learning from them. So you have a podcast too. You have actually two podcasts. Tell us about them.
You know what, Suzanne, having a podcast is something that surprises people. It doesn't surprise other entrepreneurs, but it surprises people that, especially in midlife, right away, it's like tech, that seems weird. And a lot of people who aren't online in the online space, they don't even listen to podcasts midlife and over. And so that's been really interesting. But I started the podcast after I'd been blogging for a while, which I highly recommend. I had at least 100 blogs, and I was in my, I think, third or fourth year of business. And I was inspired by somebody who had been doing quite well in a podcast. And she was younger than me. And I just thought, wow, she really always says if she can do it, anybody can do it. And I thought to myself, I've always loved audio. I've always been attracted to talk radio, the kinds that, in the States, NPR, and in Canada, CBC, but like the publicly funded radio that's highly produced and has amazing guests and all that. I've always listened to that, even when I was in high school. And I've always been attracted to sound. Even when I was in third grade, I asked for a tape recorder as a birthday present. And we were, recording shenanigans and stuff, but still, it was a lot of fun. And I was always attracted to that. And even now, I have a gramophone, an antique gramophone that you crank up and put the cylinder beeswax records on. So I've always been attracted to that. And some people are attracted to YouTube. I am not as attracted to anything that requires video, TikTok, Instagram, any of that stuff. I'm much more attracted to audio. So when I saw another woman in this space doing it well, I thought, what the heck? I'm going to give it a try because I'm naturally interested in it. And I don't know, it just feels like a good fit because as entrepreneurs, we want to do something that we like. That's the whole point. So this seemed to be a good fit with something I liked. So I started by hiring somebody who helped people start podcasts, and that person helped me with the basics, the intro. I had a narrator for the intro and my first 3 episodes and getting the tech lined up, getting it on iTunes. And that was a huge relief because anything techie, I'm like, ugh, I just don't want more of that. I don't, right away I feel overwhelmed and I'm going to start procrastinating. So anyway, that podcast got off the ground in late July 2017. It's called Women in the Middle, Loving Life After 50. And it does quite well. It's in the top 0.5% globally of all podcasts. And it's popular. And when I hear from people, it generates about 50% of my paying clients. They've been listening sometimes for a long time. Sometimes they've listened from the beginning. And, they hop on a Zoom call with me and they tell me these things and how much they've been able to learn and change and grow. And they know me quite well. And I'm always saying, oh my gosh, you know all my stupid stories right now. And I know nothing about you. They know about the dog. They know about marching band when I was a kid. They know about everything. But it's really, really been fun and challenging. I interview people about 50% of the time. And when I started the podcast, I wasn't even thinking about where it would go and maybe I would have interviews. I didn't know. But I did that. And now, at the time of this recording, there are over 350 episodes out there. And then a couple of months ago, in March 2024, I launched Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is about the reality of running a business when you're over 50. What's really going on when midlife happens. So when you're dealing with aging parents and you have energy issues and menopause and empty nest and anything else that's going to pop up, when you are really trying to run your business intentionally the way you want to at this age and stage. And on this podcast, it's all interview, and 2 interviews come out a week. 2 episodes come out a week, and it has been super fun. So I am, like you said, meeting unbelievably interesting people from all kinds of entrepreneurial experiences, bricks and mortar, everything. Lots of coaches, lots of people who have been serial entrepreneurs, and they are speaking very candidly about what is really going on and what they've done to help themselves create the business that they want at this age. My work is all about using the lens of age and stage and just welcoming it. That's the reality. Don't pretend it's not that. It is that. It is that. And these women, I think all of us should be wearing superhero capes because there's a lot to deal with when you're trying to run a business.
Yeah, that's how we met. So I'm
Yes.
excited. I think the episode hasn't come out yet.
Not yet. You will
Yeah.
absolutely know because,
Yeah.
of course, I want my guests to promote their episodes.
Oh, yeah, I
So we
will.
can have conversations about them. Yeah. And, that's one thing that's different. When you have entrepreneurs on as guests, we are highly motivated to promote the episode. And a lot of times you can do exactly what we're doing, where we found each other somehow. How did you find the podcast? Was it on a Facebook group?
It was probably on Google. I was probably just Googling other midlife business coaches. I wanted to see like what's out there, basically.
Okay, so you
That's how I
came into
found
my
it.
world, you
Yeah.
applied, you were a perfect fit, and then we're talking, and then you invited me on your show, which is a beautiful thing.
Yes, exactly. That's how it should work. I love collaborating in the online world. So, sharing your story. I love that you got support in the beginning, the tech. I always say, for me, it was easy, the tech setup, but of course, it's a little bit of my background. I also think today we have so many tools that make it easy, like Buzzsprout, which I'm using for hosting, and they have tutorials and really guide you through everything.
Well, things have changed quite a bit even since 2017. When I
Yeah.
started out, I was in the cedar closet. So at my house, we have a pretty large cedar closet filled with clothes from the 1990s and maybe some from the 80s. So I thought, well, I need to be down there. And I used a teleprompter on my iPad and I had everything set up on a portable desk and it's freezing down there. And I was surrounded by clothes of these weird colors from the
Which is
90s.
good for the sound. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great for the sound. So I did that for a while. And then I didn't like that it was cold and I didn't like that it was dark. So I decided to take over this corner of my house, a back corner that has a big window to a ravine to my right. And I liked it much better here. And I didn't appreciate that a good quality mic, it just solves a lot of problems. So the mic really doesn't pick up a lot of sound that's far away from my mouth. And so it meant that I could be up here and it didn't really matter. I didn't need to have all of the things, all of the clothes and the baffling and the privacy that I thought I needed to record. So is it the same as a highly produced episode? Probably not, but it's pretty good. It's pretty darn good. So I came up here out of the closet and this is where I remain.
So what are you using? Share some tips with our listeners. So what's the
Okay.
setup that you have for your amazing podcast?
Okay. It's let me look here. The mic is called Audio Technica ATR 2100 USB, and it was recommended to me by that original podcast producer. And since then, I've noticed a lot of people do have this mic. I have it on an arm, a metal arm that's attached to my desk. So it goes up and down and feels really fancy. And then I just use an app called Audacity just on my laptop. That's
Yeah,
it.
amazing. Yeah, great. I haven't even simple. I just have still the Blue Yeti, which I got when I started because back then everybody was recommending it. I don't think anybody still recommends it, but and
Well,
I
and
still
then
want to get this little arm, but I haven't. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the arm is nice. There is some fancy setup that people have that looks really cool. It seems to be higher and then it comes down and there's like a metal
Mm.
ring around the mic and it hangs down. It looks very fancy. I don't even know what that is, but I know when I see it, I'm like, that's interesting. Even when they're just starting out, they look, highly professional with that setup. And when I
Yes.
download, I just download it into Dropbox and then I make my art on Canva and I do summary notes on Word, put everything in Dropbox, and then I have an editor who picks it up and they send me an edited version. I advise if there's anything else that needs to be tweaked. And then what's the next thing? Oh, then they upload it. So they put it on my website, they put it on iTunes and all the places, and then I do deal with the promotion. That's
Love
it.
it. Yeah. When I started my podcast, I also had an editor and he also created the intro and outro and everything. And then last summer, I took a break from podcasting and laid off my my editor. And when I started it again, I just started using Descript,
Oh,
which I love. So I'm recording straight into Descript. It's an app, descript.com, and it creates a script. So after you've created your audio, so you can create audios, videos, screen videos, everything. And then you have a script, so you read it, and you can start editing in the script. So you can start deleting filler words. Or when you made a mistake, and I normally just take a break, and then I start again. And so I see that I can simply delete the words, the sentence. You don't have to listen
mm,
to it. It saves so much time. I don't need an editor anymore. And I just edit, I just re-recorded my intro, added in there. I just like copy paste it. It's so simple. I love it so much. And they have like the studio sound feature that
wow.
enhances everything, which also has Buzzsprout, which I'm using to host my podcast. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I record it, I export it as a MP3, upload it in Buzzsprout. I pay there for the studio sound feature, which makes it sound amazing. And
I
then,
bet.
of course, it's shared everywhere. And then I have the script. So I use the script, put it into ChatGPT, make this into a podcast. And then when I have the podcast, I say, make this into show notes, make
Oh,
this into a newsletter,
oh,
make this into a
okay.
social media caption.
Okay, wow. Okay, so I'm feeling very old at this moment because I am not using Chat GPT at
It's my
all with
new
podcasts.
setup.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting too. I start with the script. So I just write a script in Google Doc and then I record it. And I've got the original podcast is done on Libsyn and the new podcast is done on Captivate because it has a feature called dynamic insertion that makes it easy to change the outro, for example,
Yeah.
on your whole back catalog as well.
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting process. I would say, in general, the second podcast, Women in the Middle Entrepreneur, is much more automated than the first one was. The first one, I still haven't tweaked a lot of my process since I started it in 2017. So my goal is once this new podcast is up and running, which it pretty much is now smoothly, I'm going to apply some of the things I learned to the old podcast and make that a little bit smoother because I can see that even not being quite as efficient as you are using some of this other tech, I can see that there's definitely it's way easier and faster to produce the two episodes than it is with my process of producing the one.
Yes.
On the other hand, the first podcast, I'm still generating 50% of original content.
Hmm.
And sometimes I sit down and I really don't know what I'm going to write about.
Yeah, I do very often do scripts too. But for example, when you do an interview, and I still record it in Zoom, I try. They have an integration with StreamYard, but I couldn't really make it work one time. I just gave it one try. I said, okay, I'm going to continue using Zoom, and then I use the audios, add it into Descript, and it creates a script.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can create a blog post out of the interview, or
Oh,
talking
that's
points, so you
great.
don't have to re-listen to things. Or when
That's
you want to
great.
create the sound bite to share on social media, you can read through it. Okay, here's an interesting point, and click.
Okay, Suzanne, this is good because what's happened is that because I don't have the script for the interviews, I don't have that quick ability to remember because I'm doing so many that I really don't remember. So that is a great idea. I can see having a script for the interviews would be very valuable. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So when you're just getting started and you're listening to this, there was probably a lot of like very fancy, techie, advanced sounding stuff. I promise you it's not. And the point is really, it can be really, really simple.
It
So
can
yeah,
be.
it's smart to get support when you're just getting started. But for example, the cover image, you can create that in Canva.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be fancy. It doesn't have to be fancy. I think the
Right. And
tip,
in
if you would
fact,
be, just make sure that it's easy to read the text or it's still a little bit readable. Not too
yes, and I
busy.
have some advice there. The best thing to do is to look at art that's on iTunes, right? Really look at it where you can see a whole page of them. Like if you want to look at whatever it is that you're interested in and you want to look at the top 100 and just really look at that and notice what pops out. Is it a color? Is it the font? Is it an image? Does the art even have an image? Just really look at that and you'll see a lot of them that you don't like and ways that they can be improved. So that's really important to just start there. And then, yeah, then that's not the most difficult part for sure.
I think Canva probably has some layouts as well. They have so many now. If you
There are
just
some. Yeah.
enter podcast cover or something.
Yeah,
So
there are
that's what
some.
you need, a short intro where you talk about what the podcast is about. I would say it's important to have a clear topic for the podcast. How do you feel about
Yes,
that?
definitely. Definitely important to have a clear topic. And then this is why I love blogging so much, is because having 100 or a couple hundred blogs under your belt, you've gotten a good sense of what your core topics, your core chunks of content are. And it's really important to let that be your guide at the beginning. You want to make sure that you have your foundational content covered and then you can start to reflect, well, what are the things that I want to talk about that I have a unique view on? What are the things that my clients are talking about? What's going on in whatever relevant area? It could be something that you've heard coming up a lot. I had something that I was worried about recently, and I went into one of my coaching calls, and sure enough, one of the women in my group talked about the same thing. And when I heard that, I'm like, this is a podcast episode. It was on my mind, it was on her mind, and that's what I recorded last night.
How do you schedule out your podcast or how do you plan your content for your podcast otherwise?
So, this is something that I am not great at. And I know there are ways to be better at it. And I have a resistance to planning that I am constantly working on.
Yeah, maybe
So,
that's the secret to your success. It's the same as with social media. Some people say they stop batching because it performs much better when they just feel it, in the moment, sharing something that just feels important to them.
wow. Yeah, I'll think that.
You take
Because
that.
I think well, there's a couple of high level things that I do. I do shoot for approximately 50% interviews and 50% original content on the women in the middle. And so having that as my guide, I know that I'm going to be recording about 2 episodes that are solo, just me. So I will start to think about it, but not too far in advance. And I do like to choose a topic based on what I'm observing. I definitely do. Or if it's timely, like if it's something about the weather or if it's something about school starting or your kids graduating, that's very relevant in midlife. So sometimes I make a decision based on what's going on. The interviews, I'm trying to space them out. Like if I've had somebody talking about midlife weight loss 2 months ago, I don't want to have another midlife weight loss person at that point, right? If I'm talking about somebody who does travel, has a laptop lifestyle, I don't want 2 of those episodes close together. So usually for something like that, sometimes I have them recorded in advance, but I wouldn't schedule it. And, I don't like to really tell people when it's going to be published because I want to leave myself that bit of flexibility. And of course, I've got the big list of guests that I would like to have on or topics I would like to address and also ideas because sometimes the spirit doesn't move you to crank out the idea, but you're very happy to have that idea on a list.
Yes, I have a list with possible content ideas. And when I sit down, I try to schedule it for a month in advance, so not terribly long either. But yeah, at the moment, I'm not even doing that, I think. It's
Yeah,
fun.
I know. I've not been doing it either, but I do think it's a gold standard. The gold standard for me is to get ahead. That's really what I want to do. I want to get to a point where I don't just have the interview recorded, but I've got it done. So the intro, everything is done. When I do interviews, this isn't a great part of my process, but I do re-listen to them and create an intro that makes sense to the topic. So I know that's not necessary, but I do it. And unfortunately, probably another area I could improve is to do that closer to the time of the recording. But currently, I don't do that. So when I pick what I want to do for a variety of reasons, I re listen to it, which is time consuming, although you
In
can
the
speed it up.
future, you're going to read it in
In
Descript.
the future, I could read it, which I'm totally excited about that idea. You can speed them up. You can make them, 1.5 is easy to listen to. And I would like to have them completely done. So in the second podcast, that's what I'm doing. My goal is to get 20 ahead completely done. And right now I've got 10 ahead. So unfortunately, or fortunately, because I'm producing 2 a week, that means right now I'm approving 3 a week. So I've got 2 for the week's consumption of the podcast and production, and then 1 extra. And I've talked to my assistant about it. I'm like, this is the goal. I want to have 20 done. So if midlife happens, which is what the whole podcast is about, women in the middle entrepreneurs, the reality of what's going on when all of a sudden you cannot be present with your job, I want to have enough of a buffer zone there that it's not stressing me out.
Mm. Yeah, funny. I don't really worry about that.
Nice.
I mean, I have my consistency in place. I feel consistency is really important. And when you're
Yes.
struggling with that, or you're just getting started and you think, oh, I just post one every week, and then every 2 weeks, and every 3 weeks, and then every 2 days, that's not going to work.
Oh, let's talk about that for a
Let's
second.
talk
You
about
are
that.
right. It is not going to work. I've been consistent at this now for, over 350 episodes, which is shocking to me. It's shocking to me. But the podcast, my commitment to it is just like brushing my teeth. Like it's happening no matter what. And for me, it happens on Mondays. So when there's a stat holiday on Mondays, it totally messes me up because I need to get ahead. And this month I've got, in a period of 2 months, there's 3 Mondays that are messed up. So that is messing me up. But I agree. You have to be consistent. You got to block it out and you need to be honest with yourself about how long it takes you. And it's important to do consistency first. And then I think work on the systems to make it take less time. It just has to be something you can't have 80% commitment about it. It has to be 100%. And one way to do that is to hire somebody else because then when they're waiting for the work, you can't have an excuse.
That's a good point too. Yes, definitely. And I feel also, yeah, definitely also going to help you get shown with the algorithm in the podcast apps, also on your website. I felt it myself last summer when I took a break from podcasting because I was just like tired of it. I was probably
Yeah.
tired of everything. That was just a few months before I pivoted my niche. So I was at that moment where suddenly it was like questioning everything. And of course, I told myself, I'm going to try videos or blogging again, but I couldn't get into that consistency. So weird. And it's so important. And I love it that you had a blog before, and now you have the podcast, and you've created that library, that content library, that asset for your business. And you're not relying on social media and just have to post on Instagram 5 times a week or something.
My approach with Instagram is low hanging fruit. Like I just do the basics of the new episodes and some quotes. This has been a long time coming, but I realized that my clients, I never get comments from people who aren't midlife coaches. It's so rare for me. No, I think it happens, but not that often. So on Facebook, it's different for me. So I do better on Facebook. I know the entrepreneurs are there, but having this midlife entrepreneur
Yeah.
podcast is newer for me. But I agree. There's something about video that I'm resistant to. And I find that if I'm not in the mood, if something intense or emotional is going on or I'm tired, I can usually crank out a podcast episode, but not video.
Yeah, so
Video
you have to
takes
know
more work.
yourself. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So there's more for me. My experience is that if I'm going to procrastinate, it's going to be more around video. I can rely on myself to usually be successful with the timing. I would say I have a very good track record. So I will say be successful with the timing
Yes, for
of the
sure.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like video, I mean, it's amazing. And if somebody is getting started and is interested and open to that, yeah, do a YouTube video. It's
Yeah.
going people see your face, it builds even more trust and connection. Voice is already more than just a written word, but video works amazingly. That's why I also think social media really helps still, because that's where people can get to know you on a deeper level. But for me, it was also the production level is just so much higher. And then you have like little animations, and then it's also fast, and I don't like that. I also don't watch a lot of videos. So you have to find what works for you. And it can be a blog. I think blogs, they never really went away. People start talk about like blogs are coming back. Yeah, I mean, they've always been there. So
Yeah. Well, I would say with both blogs and podcasts and anything, we have to really appreciate the keywords that work for our business. And SEO, I have found for many less experienced entrepreneurs, is off the radar.
mm.
And it's so important when it comes to titling your episodes, titling your blog, and ultimately being found on Google, which is another gold standard. And so, for me personally, I did do a little work in that area. So, number one way people find me is the podcast. Number two is a Google search. And I've had clients come into me without hearing the podcast and Google and make a significant investment in themselves to work with me. It's amazing to me that after all the work I do on a podcast, it's a reminder that people make decisions differently. And I do have an hour phone call that happens, like a consult. I definitely want to get to know them and have them get to know me and really discuss the kind of results that they could have by working together and taking the time to do that. Yeah, but it's very interesting that not all titles are created equal. You know, you got to be found. I would say another thing, though, that can be very useful with promoting the podcast is to find Facebook groups that allow posts. So, entrepreneurial groups, business groups, women in business type groups, blogging groups, podcaster groups, typically those kinds of groups will allow self promotion on a post on a certain day. What I don't like to see happen is when people start posting on a group that is not for business and just try to, generate interest and become known and I don't want to say steal, but use your audience as a way to create leads for themselves.
yes,
I'm
I had
personally not a
that.
fan
Yeah.
of that. I'm not a fan of that. But these business groups, the whole point is to promote your stuff and to share and learn from each other. So I highly recommend doing that. Find those Facebook groups, some paid, some not. Find out if they allow it on a certain day and just block that into your schedule so that you have a place to promote your new episodes and hopefully generate some conversation.
I love that. That's a great tip. I'm going to start actually a wellness lifestyle blog around midlife. So that's going to be your opportunity as well to guest blog. And we might have a podcast in the future as well. Who knows? It's going to start pretty
Oh,
small,
that's exciting. You have
pretty
such a
small.
good
And
story, Suzanne. Your story of how you got where you are with all that travel and it's so exciting. Very good.
oh,
Good
thank you.
story.
And I'm starting a free community on school, which I love. There's actually a really great menopause community with, I think, over 5,000 members now from Laura Lumby, I think.
Hmm.
Really, yeah, I'll send you the
Awesome.
link.
I would love that.
Check it out. So that was so much fun. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your experience. And yeah, so when you have any other questions about podcasting when listening to this, get in touch. Check out Suzy's podcast, both of them. They're amazing. We
Oh,
add the
thank
links
you.
to the show notes, but please also share where can people go to learn more about you.
Oh, absolutely. And if there's time, I want to tell you about the best and the worst thing that's ever happened to me while recording a podcast, if there's time.
Oh yeah, oh God, that's great.
Okay, so a great way to get a hold of me is just to head over to my website at suzyrosenstein.com. That's Suzy Rosenstein, Rosenstein.com. And you can find links to everything, including a freebie. I'm going to give you a really easy link to remember for that one. It's called freepodcastbundle.com. And you can get the top secrets to fall in love with your life again after 50 based on 12 popular episodes from the Women in the Middle. It'll give you a great background of what the podcast is about. It's entertaining. We're talking about empty nest and underwear and careers and self-care and all kinds of things. My coaching is from a mindfulness perspective. It's cognitive based. And so there's lots to think about always on these episodes. So you want to hear about the worst thing that's ever happened to me while recording?
Yes.
Okay, it happened last summer and it was crazy. As I mentioned, I am sitting here with a big window on a ravine, a forest. And one of the things that we deal with, well, I love the birds, so I'm doing everything I can to attract birds to my backyard. Lots of feeders and a bird bath. And unfortunately, sometimes they have a window strike. They hit the window. So I've done everything I can to prevent that. I've got things stuck to the window and I make things to hang from the window and blow and make noise and everything. So there's, to some success, but it's very sad when that happens. So I'm sitting here recording with a guest who has a green type of product and she has a very interesting story, which is great. And all of a sudden there is a huge bang, like a massive crash. And I was scared, like it startled me. It was during the recording. And I got up to look and a huge hawk hit the window. Not a little tiny, you know, uh, finch. It was a massive hawk. Now, I read that when you see a bird strike, you should run out and turn the bird over. Like if they're upside down, you flip them. And a lot of times that's helps. I don't know. I read that somewhere. I hope that's good information. And I saw the hawk was like that, but he quickly righted himself. So I'm like, phew. And he jumped up into the tree and he like chilled out for a couple minutes and then he flew away. Well, I come back to the guest, explained what happened. And she says, "Oh my gosh, I have two blogs that I've written because she does green design in buildings and stuff like that about how to prevent bird strikes and the film that you have to get for the window." And she knew everything about it. So it was so scary. And it was so like I couldn't have been talking to a better person.
It's a great coincidence. I love
That
it
was a
how
good
that
one.
happens. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now the best thing or the most delightfully surprising thing that happened, and I've had lots of amazing things that have happened. I got pitched by somebody who was a really big name when we grew up. So her name is Joan London, and she was the one of the hosts of a very popular morning news show called Good Morning America. She was the host for like, I don't know, like a long time, couple of decades. And she was so well known. Everybody loved her. She had done reporting from the Olympics and with presidents. Like she was a journalist and she was just lovable and delightful. Everybody knew her. And so she was on People magazine. She was very public with what was going on in her family and her health and all kinds of things. And she'd written a book. So I was just reading my email and there was a pitch there, part of her book promotion, for her to be on my podcast with which meant for her to be sitting there in my Zoom square. So I said yes right away. And then I'm sitting here in my Zoom square and she pops in and I was just so nervous. But she wrote a book about turning 70 and it was so well done and it had color pictures and she had so many stories and she was so professional. So it was just such a delight to be able to help her do something that I knew was an important book and it was funny and so good. And it was such a delight for me to have my podcast be a place that was, where she wanted to promote her book. Super, super fun.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. Really, really inspiring as well. Yes,
Thank you.
you don't really know what doors it's going to open.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's definitely something I love doing. And meeting new people, like the fact that we're meeting now and you live far away and we connected through the podcast. And it really is an intimate way to just quietly have a little earbud in and listen to somebody. And I call podcasts a party in your purse.
Oh,
It's a party in
never
your
heard
purse.
that. That's fun.
I came up with it. And because I think it is, your phone is such a source of entertainment, and podcasts, I think, are so special because you can look up anything. You want to look up about gardening, music, dogs, self-development, anything. And right there it is, a click away.
That's so true. Yes. Well, thanks for listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show, Suzy. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming on my podcast too. It was really, really great to have this opportunity.